Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. And this week we're going to do something a little bit different. So I have been working on the car, but in the last week or so, I haven't made enough progress to make an interesting episode. So what I'm gonna do is continue working on the car throughout the course of the next week and release an episode that contains 2 weeks worth of work because I think it'll just be a lot better that way instead of making two smaller episodes. But this is a nice chance for me to, for the first time, share my thoughts about where this thing is going because I haven't done that so far. In the course of the last 7 weeks or so, you guys have been just watching me disassemble this whole thing without really having much of an idea as to what this build is going to be. So, and that was really mostly because I haven't had much of an idea. I hadn't done too much planning in week one when I started tearing into it. But it's been a little while now. I have been doing a moderate amount of research, doing some planning and doing some budgeting to really figure out the next steps in all of this. And it may not make much sense. So I just kind of wanted to explain. But before I get into all of that, let's go ahead and reveal this engine because this is kind of the central piece to all of this, obviously. So it was delivered last week. And I've been dropping plenty of hints as to what this may be, both in the previous episodes and in the comments. So maybe it won't be a surprise to some of you, but let's go ahead and just unwrap it and we can talk about it. So guys, say hello to the new heart of the 280Z moving forward. This is the RB25 DET, complete with a 5-speed manual transmission, stock ECU, and harness. And it is also time to say a few parting words to the original L28 ET. I have learned so much from working on you. I have had so much fun with you. I will always remember you and miss you, but it's time for us to say goodbye. By the way, if you guys want this thing, let me know, talk to me, because I would much rather sell it to you guys at a very, very fair price, I promise. I'd much rather see it go to you guys than try to post this thing up on Craigslist and go through that whole ordeal. You guys know how solid this engine is. It deserves a home. It deserves to run again. You guys have seen the compression testing results. You guys have seen me drive around in it, seen me replace all the injectors, rebuild the head, the distributor, water pump, the whole 9 yards. So let me know if you have a use for this engine and transmission, because I would love for it to go somewhere that it's gonna get a few more miles in. Anyway, back to this thing. So I ordered this engine from a company called Tennessee JDM Motors located in Memphis, Tennessee. And from what I can gather online, they're a very reputable shop, although I haven't visited them, but I have been talking to the owner over the course of the last couple of weeks over several phone calls, trying to figure out what his shop is about, what he stands for, and how he's sourcing the engines. And most importantly, I noticed that he had a few different RB25s with 5-speed manual assemblies, and they were priced a little differently. So I wanted to get a chance to know what I'm buying and what's the reasoning behind pricing them differently. And he doesn't know, obviously, that I run a very small YouTube channel, and it's not relevant, but he did take the time to really just kind of explain, and he was happy to answer all of my questions, and he spent a lot of time with me, and I really kind of appreciated that. But anyway, what he explained to me about the pricing really made a lot of sense. So you can find assemblies like this for as cheap as $2,500 all the way to over $4,000, and the pricing Aside from the obvious things like whether shipping is included and the general condition and the estimated mileage of the engine, it really comes down to two things, I think. One is the ECU included or not, and whether the harness has been snipped, because a lot of times to save time, they just snip the entire harness, and that actually is a very valuable piece. But the much more important factor is the 5-speed transmission. So what he explained to me was that when these RB25s are very much in demand, so when they import them and sell them to people like me, the shops know that we all prefer the 5-speed manual, but the RB25 5-speed manuals are very hard to find, just laying around. So what they do is source a RB20 5-speed manual, which is completely interchangeable with the 25 manual. And those are a little bit cheaper, easier to find, but they're also a little bit weaker. And that explains about $500 to $600 worth of price differential between the assemblies. So I thought you guys might like to know that this transmission is supposed to be original or matching with the engine. I really have no way to verify that, but at least that's what he said. So I'm not an expert on RB engines or doing engine swaps in general, so I will try to stick to what I do know or what I've been able to gather in terms of figuring out how to fit this into that car. So if you're interested in doing any kind of RB swap into a Datsun or specifically an S30Z, there's really two companies that you should know about. One of them is McKinney Motorsports and the other one is CX Racing. Both of the companies offer a lot of the same parts, like the engine mounts, transmission mount, intercooler kits, and radiators, and all that stuff. But McKinney Motorsports parts tend to be a little bit, if not a lot more expensive than CX Racing parts. And McKinney Motorsports is the company that's based out of the US. They're a shop out of California. And they make their parts to order. And from what I can tell in terms of forum posts and reviews and things like that, their parts are a lot sturdier, they're a little bit more quality made, although their delivery times tend to be a lot longer. CX Racing imports their parts from China, and in exchange for charging a lot less, I don't want to make it seem like they're a crap company, because a lot of people have had success using their parts, but there's a lot more comments like, hey, I had to tweak this little thing to make it work just right. The oil pan isn't as high quality as something I would have expected and stuff like that. I didn't really want to deal with that, so I'm happy to pay a little bit more to ensure that I get quality parts. Anyway, so in terms of just simply dropping this engine into this car, there's two things that I want to talk about. So obviously you can fabricate your own motor mounts if you are able to do that. I'm not able to do that, so I just went ahead and spent the $525, I think, to buy the prefabricated, just bolt-on motor mount and a transmission mount that works with this car, specifically for the RB25. So also the oil pan is the second thing. So you guys can see that this oil pan has a sump that's located in the front. This stock oil pan won't work with the cross member that Z has right here. It actually needs to be converted into a rear sump oil pan. And people who are a lot more skilled at fabricating than I am can convert this thing. I've seen people kind of cut the flange off right here and to shift this entire thing back and convert it into a rear sump oil pan. I don't have the skills to do that. So I did just go ahead and buy a custom aluminum rear sump oil pan from McKinney, which wasn't cheap, by the way. I couldn't believe that I had to spend that much money. But it is really the only well-known, reputable option if you don't want to do the work yourself. So I did spend $800 getting a custom oil pan that is made to work in this engine bay. So I essentially paid around $1,400 to pay my way out of dropping this engine into that car a fairly painless process, I hope. Now, the hard part is actually getting this to hook up to everything and run. And at this point, you guys might be wondering, why am I doing this now? Why did you buy this motor? You're not even done working on the body and getting it ready for an engine. And really the reason for that is I'm getting awfully nervous about just continuing to work on this car without seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know if this all is gonna work out. I think it will make me feel a lot better to actually place this engine into that car and get it to turn over. So I am going to put the pedal box back in and figure out all the wiring and see if I can reuse this stock harness and the ECU. It's gonna take a ton of research. I don't exactly know how to do that, but I'm sure I can figure it out. And another big reason is I do want to see how I'm supposed to be modifying this engine bay. Again, not a ton of modification really needs to be made because that engine should fit neatly in here. But a lot of these brackets and kind of holes need to be filled, or these brackets need to be cut out. And I do want to know which ones I'm supposed to be keeping and which holes I'll be reusing, or what additional holes I need to be drilling before I, sand all of this down, blast all of this down and get it painted. So there is a practical reason to quote unquote test fit this engine into that car. Obviously, I won't really have to make it run, but I would like to see how everything fits together before I continue working on the body. So I placed the order for the engine mount and the oil pan about a week ago, and unfortunately, the parts from McKinney are made to order, so it's not exactly Amazon one-day shipping. So I think it'll take about a couple of weeks for it to come in. In the meantime, what we have to do is remove all of the hard lines from underneath the car and put this back, or rear suspension assembly back on the car. I don't think I have to reinstall the differential, but at least make the car sit on 4 tires instead of on a rack like this. I'll probably try to get it to run out of a gas can instead of the fuel tank, because the fuel system is a whole nother thing that I need to figure out. And I'll also try to place an order for the intercooler and the radiator. I'm not sure if I can reuse the radiator that used to be in this car. I don't think the 2-core radiator is going to cut it for a turbocharged 2.5 liter, but we'll figure all that stuff out. And over the course of the next couple of months, there are going to be times in which I'm just waiting for parts to come in. So in the downtimes that I have, I will start to work on the body. I will practice sanding down properly and doing some body work. And again, I haven't decided whether or not to ship this entire thing to a shop yet, but there are some things that I could be doing to keep the costs low, like sanding a lot of this down and removing these windows. And I don't know, maybe I'll try to tackle that floor pan and the frame rail by myself. But there's plenty of work to be done. So that is essentially the plan for the next few months. I hope you guys found that helpful, if not motivating. Anyway, that's it for this week. I really appreciate you guys tuning in once again, and see you guys later. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Anywhere you want.
Just right here fine. So excited.
Oh, yeah. Got some people to help you do it?
No, I just me, myself, and I.
Really?
I got some friends coming over every once in a while.
Right.
Give me a hand, but
Right.
it's mostly me.